Get into interest rate futures versus forward contracts. And before we get into the material, let me just remind you our discussion about forward rate agreements. Remember, we talked about a factory that will start operations after 1 year, and then it will need a loan after 1 year for 1 year. And one solution for locking that rate was getting into an FRA that we had said, okay, we'll get this loan at 4.4%. And by that time, if the interest rate went up to 5%, then we'll be very happy because we locked our rate in advance, right? So another way of doing that is, instead of the forward, what you could do is get into a future. So interest rate futures offer a similar arrangement to people who want to lock interest rates in the future. And as far as the difference between forwards and futures is concerned, you already know that forwards are customized, whereas futures are standardized, right? And interest rate futures are very, very liquid. So it's very easy to get into them for very, very large positions and get out of them as well. So it's a very good option for companies that want to lock their interest rate in the future, or they want to protect themselves from changes in the interest rate. But there is a big difference between interest rate futures and forward rate agreements. And what that is, let's say you as the owner of this factory think that the interest rate is going to go up. That is why you are long the forward rate agreement, which means if the interest rate actually did go up from 4.4 to 5%, you will benefit if you are long. Now, that is not the situation with interest rate futures. If you think the interest rate is going to go up, then as far as interest rate futures are concerned, you will go short the interest rate futures, because this is how the value of an interest rate future is calculated. Let's say the current rate is 2%, right? So 2% multiplied by 100 will be 2. And the way the value of the forward contract is calculated is that we take that rate, we multiply it by 100, and then we minus that from 100, which means this will become 98. So that will be the value of the future contract, interest rate future contract right now. And if the interest rate, let's say, goes up to 3%, then 3% multiplied by 100 and 100 minus that will mean that this will become 97. Now, when the interest rate went up from 2 to 3, your future value actually went down. So if you think the interest rate is going to go up, you should go short the interest rate future, not long. Whereas for FRA, we were going long. So this is a very, very big difference between the two. And let me demonstrate that again. So let's say the rate is 1.75. You will put that 1.75 over here, and you will minus that from 100. And what you will have is 98.25. And now if this 1.75 goes up, the value of this future contract will come down. So if you think interest rates are expected to go up, you should go short the interest rate future contract. Is this clear? Okay. And this is demonstrated in this chart very clearly, that when the interest rate is rising, so the long FRA gains, but the short future party gains, right? And if the interest rate is falling, then the short FRA gains, whereas the long futures contract gains in the case where interest rates are falling. So this is a very, very big contrast between the two, that is interest rate futures versus forward contracts. Also, another point is that futures are marked to market. And this is something you already know from the previous video. So unlike forward contracts, which are settled at the end of the year, at the end of the duration. So let's say you are here and your loan is starting after 1 year and it is for another year. So when you get from here to here, you will know what the rate has become. So you initially locked 4.4%, and it turns out that the rate has actually gone up to 5%. So this difference is something you will gain multiplied by the notional principal. Let's say it's $100 million loan. And this is something we discussed previously in FRA videos. And then that profit and loss is actually here at the end, and you have to bring it back to today. But in the case of futures, this is not how it's done. What it is that it's settled on a daily basis and at a basis point value level. What is basis point? 1% is basically 100 basis points. So what we monitor is the second digit of the percentage. And let me give you an example. So the rate that was locked on a future was 2.2%, and the future value was 1,005,525. Now pay close attention to this 525 in the end, and pay close attention to this last digit, which is 1. So it's 2.21, which is the basis point over here, 2%. And because we're talking about 1% being 100 basis points, so this is the basis point. Now let's say this goes up 1% from 2.21 to 2.22. Look at the change in the value of the contract. It went up from 525 to 550. That means 1 basis point increase caused an increase of $25. Now let's compare it to a 1 basis point decrease, where it went from 2.21 to 2.20, and that caused a decrease from 525 to 500. So a 1 basis point decrease caused a decrease of $25. So as you can see that both the increase and decrease in the interest rate of 1 basis point change the contract basis point value by $25, and this is a linear relationship and not a convex relationship. So I will talk to you in detail about how a futures value is linear, whereas a forward contract or a FRA is actually convex. But I'll tell you about that in a separate slide. The reason, however, I will emphasize on this slide is that because we are discounting this back. The FRA value is supposed to be settled at the end of the contract, but because we are here at this point, what we do is we discount it back to today, which makes it convex, whereas the future value is linear. As you can see that 1 basis point increases by 25 and 1 basis point decreases by 25. But I will explain this separately on a separate slide with a proper infographic.